So, as we all know, some people on the left, basically all around the world, have raised their voices on the issue of how we should have open borders for merely everybody that wants to come into Europe. Or USA, for that matter. Their basis for this argument is, that since everybody is equal, and borders are really an ancient way of separating otherwise similar people from each other, and since we all know, that we're not merely citizens of our own countries, but citizens of the world, we should get rid of borders altogether, and allow people to travel and move, as they please. But of course, this kind of thinking has no place in real politics, because if everyone would be welcome everywhere, it would make it quickly impossible to sustain a coherent social system, to remain economically stable, and it would be impossible to stay in control of the current system altogether. Of course, from the eyes of an anarchistic leftist, this would really be a thing to strive for. I mean, since the borders and the state are evil, and racist, and all that jazz, destroying the Western way of living and replacing it with a multitude of other systems and cultures would be the best thing to happen to the West since Stalin, am I right? Right? Guys? Obviously they haven't thought this one through. Let's take a closer look at this humanitarian effort, shall we? So, if we don't take the drunk anarchists to count, the left wants a leftist government, and that's of course obvious. Everyone wants a government that reflects their personal values. What is a leftist state, in the eyes of a hard-boiled leftist? It is a utopia, where everyone is equal. Equality of outcome has overtaken the equality of opportunity, and all people get similar treatment everywhere, anytime, and thus, nothing is under the control of an individual, or even a largish group of people, but all the control is in the hands of the government. Doesn't sound that good anymore, yeah? But let's continue. How does an open border policy fit into this? Let's look at the vast majority of people coming to Finland, and Europe right this moment. What is their ideology? If we're honest to ourselves, we can admit that it's Islam. You know, the religion of peace. Bear in mind, Islam isn't a race, so what I'm about to say isn't racist by any means. We can talk about race and the pigment of our skins in a different post, but back to Islam, now. How many Islamic countries are there, that support the Western leftist ideals of living? How many? You already know where I'm going with this, but I will still spell it out for you. None. There is no such thing, and that's because of the oppressive and authoritarian nature of Islam. Islam oppresses women, children, and while men clearly rule over women, men are oppressed just as bad, and that's just a fact. I mean, if you spent 15 minutes reading the Quran, you'd know what I'm talking about. You can also spend 15 minutes online, researching the biggest Islamic states in existence right now, and you'd be forced to admit that I'm right. Take the place where Islam was said to be born, Saudi Arabia. Women aren't allowed to wear seat belts there, because that'd cause their veil to tighten and show the form of their body, which is highly forbidden, obviously, and that'd make men desire the things that are highly forbidden. That is disgustingly oppressive against women, and if you disagree, well, you're out of your mind. Diversity is good. Is it? Always, is it? Of course, that's just one law, one in a million laws that are all worse than the next one. If you're caught reading the Bible in Saudi Arabia, you will be given to the authorities, that by law have to throw your ass in jail, or if you're not local, you're forced to pay fines and leave the country. Talk about acceptance and diversity, talk about a multiculturalistic melting pot, am I right? What is it that prevents these Islamic countries from developing the kind of societies that we have? What is it that really oppresses the people there? Islam, obviously. They have no political parties to reflect your far-left views, because the only political party they really have is the religion of Islam. You either submit to it, or you pay for your disobedience. Society is run by its people, driven by religion or not, so is that the kind of world that we want to share with those people? Is that the kind of world that we want to open our borders to? Are those the kind of people that we want more to our Western nations? Care about your nation or don't, I bet you wouldn't want to live under the shadow of Islam, and if you really do, you're more than welcome to move to the Saudis. If you're a guy, or a girl, With even half a brain, your answer is hell no. The fact of the matter is, if we continue to take, who are said to be, refugees, or immigrants, from third world countries, we'll eventually end up being a minority. Just a quick look at the birth rates on European people versus refugees can confirm that fact. People are making less and less white Western babies, and that's a fact. The people who are making more than enough babies at a growing rate, are, drum rolls, immigrants. Like it or not, it's a statistical fact, that we're going to be a minority at our own countries, and that's not a fear-mongering opinion of a National Socialist pig, that's a fact. What happens, when that happens? Are you going to be able to live as an open-border, multicultural leftist, who thinks that everyone possesses the same kind of freedom of speech and expression, and really, love is the driving force of this rainbow state? No. As soon as Islam is the biggest religion in the West, the borders will close. Finnish people will have to learn a new way of life, imported with force by people who were warned, but didn't listen. Finnish people will bow down to Allah, or they will be either driven out of their homelands, or killed, or worse. I realize that the language I use is a bit harsh, but in my opinion, that's what the current state of affairs demands. There is no peace in Islam, only death and misery. And we're importing that fear here, to a place it doesn't belong, and we're doing it faster, and faster. Statistics show that most, not all, Muslim people, who come to Europe as refugees, have no intention to assimilate to our culture. I don't have problem with people who come from different places to assimilate to our culture, to adhere to our European values and to pay taxes towards building our nations. I wouldn't have a problem with that per se. But the fact is, that most refugees don't end up paying taxes, and instead feed off of our welfare system to feed their, usually, numerous children. We don't have money to pay for these people. It has been calculated, that the only immigration we could offer would be a controlled amount of work-aged people coming here, and leaving when still work-aged. Simply put, we could only afford young people, who left Finland while they were still young, and the majority doesn't do so, obviously. If they all decided to retire here, we'd be fucked. And as we all know by now, the reality is, that we are fucked. People don't want to talk about the issues of mass immigration out of fear for being labeled all the bad things under the sun, and if that doesn't change, nothing ever will. We must be proud enough of our own culture to raise our voices. We can do it without being hostile to each other, because fighting our own can only hurt us in the long run. Debate. Discuss. Have a dialogue. Be proactive, rather than reactive. Bear in mind, I'm not necessarily voting for closing the borders completely and forever. The fact of the matter just is, that the situation has gotten way out of control, to a point where there are actual marches orchestrated by refugees to bring Sharia law to Europe. Think about that. Take all the time you need. We wouldn't want that to happen, at least I wouldn't. Some people may say that that could never happen, but just look at what's happened to Britain and Sweden, for example. The ever-growing Muslim population has claimed control over certain areas, and even the police doesn't want to go there. In Britain, they're using their own Sharia-based judging systems inside these areas, and God forbid, if you, as a Western white person, go there. At some places, you will be attacked because of your color, and that's not really the change that I wish to see in the Western world. We have given up, we have lost control. And we're too dumb to admit it, and face the problems that we've created. Let's look at the world with honesty in our hearts, and let's fix what's left to fix, because it's getting close to being too late already. That's enough for now, stay safe, and stay glorious. Finish in fiddle.